August 18th, 1590. Governor John White returned to England's colony on Roanoke Island after nearly 3 years away, expecting to reunite with his family. Instead, he found an abandoned settlement. The houses were still standing. There were no bodies, no signs of battle, and no clear explanation. More than 4 centuries later, no one knows what happened to the 115 settlers who disappeared.
At first, the mystery seems simple. An isolated colony disappeared. But the evidence tells a different story. The settlement wasn't destroyed. The settlers didn't leave behind signs of a massacre. And the only clue they left has never fully explained what happened. So were they killed? Absorbed into another community? Or did something else happen entirely? To answer that question, we have to return to the beginning of England's first attempt to build a permanent colony in North America. In 1587, Governor John White arrived at Roanoke with 115 settlers, determined to build a permanent English community. Unlike earlier expeditions, this group included entire families, not just soldiers and explorers. Among them was White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, who soon gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in North America. The colony began repairing homes, planting crops, and preparing for the future. But there was one problem they couldn't solve. Their supplies were running out. The settlers asked White to sail back to England for help, believing he would return within a few months. Neither White nor the colonists realized that promise would become the beginning of one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries.
The colony's greatest threat wasn't an enemy. It was time. Their food was running low, supplies were disappearing, and another Atlantic crossing would take months. The settlers agreed there was only one solution. John White had to return to England. Before he left, they made a simple plan. If the colony moved to a safer location, they would leave behind the name of their destination. If they were forced to leave under attack, they would carve a Christian cross as a warning. Confident he would return before the next major season, White boarded his ship and sailed for England. He believed he was saying goodbye for only a few months. He had no way of knowing it would be the last time he ever saw his family.
But White's return didn't go as planned. Shortly after reaching England, war changed everything. Spain's massive armada threatened to invade, and nearly every available English ship was ordered to support the country's defense. White tried repeatedly to organize another voyage. Each attempt failed. Months passed, then another year. Across the Atlantic, the colony remained completely isolated. No supply ships arrived. No letters reached England. No one knew whether the settlers were alive or dead. By the time White finally secured a ship in 1590, nearly 3 years had passed since he had promised to return. He was finally going back to Roanoke. He expected answers. Instead, he was about to discover an even greater mystery.
When White finally reached Roanoke, the colony was exactly where he had left it. The buildings still stood. The wooden fence still surrounded the settlement. Nothing suggested a violent attack. But there was no one there. The settlers had vanished. As White searched the village, one detail caught his attention. A word had been carved into one of the wooden posts. He stepped closer. It read, CROATOAN. At first, the message didn't alarm him. In fact, it gave him hope. Before leaving England, the settlers had agreed that if they ever relocated, they would leave the name of their destination behind.
If they had been forced to flee under attack, they would also carve a cross beside it. White searched carefully. There was no cross. Only one word: CROATOAN. Then the weather changed. A powerful storm forced his ships back out to sea before they could search the island the message seemed to point toward. White never returned.
So, what did CROATOAN actually mean? It wasn't a code. It was the name of an island just south of Roanoke, where the CROATOAN people lived. Unlike some neighboring tribes, they had maintained friendly relations with the English. To White, the message seemed straightforward. The settlers had moved. But there was one problem. He never reached CROATOAN Island. The storm that forced his ships away also ended his search. John White never returned to North America. He never saw his daughter again. He never learned what happened to his granddaughter. Everything we know after that comes from archaeology and the evidence it continues to uncover.
Over the centuries, researchers have searched for traces of the missing colony. Excavations on Hatteras Island have uncovered English tools, ceramics, and metal objects dating to the late 16th century. Some historians believe these discoveries support the idea that at least part of the colony joined the CROATOAN people. Other discoveries point farther inland, suggesting the settlers may have divided into smaller groups in search of food and safer land. But every new discovery creates another question. None of the artifacts can be directly linked to the 115 people who disappeared. The evidence points in several directions, not one.
So which explanation fits the evidence best? If the colony had been destroyed in an attack, why wasn't it burned? If the settlers had starved, where are the graves? If the Spanish had found Roanoke, why is there no surviving record describing its destruction? The strongest theory remains the simplest. The colonists left voluntarily and were absorbed into nearby indigenous communities. It explains the carved message. It explains the abandoned settlement. And it explains why no signs of a violent struggle were ever found. But it doesn't explain everything. No document confirms it. No archaeological discovery proves it beyond doubt. The mystery survives because every theory leaves something unanswered.
Today, the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of history's oldest unsolved mysteries. Not because people stopped searching, but because the evidence refuses to tell a single story. Perhaps the settlers survived by becoming part of another community. Perhaps they moved inland and slowly disappeared into history. Or perhaps the truth was lost with the last person who left the island. More than 400 years later, one question still remains. What really happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Maybe the answer has been waiting for centuries, hidden in the evidence, just beyond our ability